Hi guys, David O'Sullivan here, and I've been looking forward to doing this video for a long time. I've talked about this film before in videos I've done over the years, but I've never done a fully dedicated video just to this film. That's right, in this video I'm going to be giving you my thoughts on one of my favourite films of all time. It is of course Blade Runner. I thought to honour the film recently celebrating its 35th anniversary, now would be the perfect opportunity to give you my thoughts on why I think Blade Runner is so great and why I love this film so much. That's right, the 25th of June marked 35 years since Blade Runner came out back in June of 1982. And seeing as I really like the idea of starting up a new My Favourite Films of All Time series, I thought Blade Runner would be the perfect one to start with because it's one of my absolute favourite films of all time. I'd definitely put it in my top 10, maybe even my top 5. Ordinarily I don't like narrowing down my favourites to just 10 or just 5, but if I had to, Blade Runner would definitely be up there. I couldn't rank my hit films, it's why I'm doing it this way. Instead of like doing kind of a top 10 or a top 20 all in one video, I'm going to spread them out across a whole series of videos and just do one film per video. And as I mentioned, this first video in my favourite films of all time is going to be Blade Runner. And lastly, before I get into my thoughts on the actual film itself, I first have to mention that the version of the film I'm going to be talking about in this video is Blade Runner the Final Cut. Yes, that's right, there's like several versions of the movie, but by far my favourite version, for me the definitive version of the film, is the Final Cut, which was released back in 2007 I believe. I also saw it when it was re-released in the cinema in 2015 and that was great. I don't have anything against the other versions. I don't hate the other versions of the film, but for me personally, the Final Cut is by far the best version. It's by far the most complete, the most perfect version, if you will. There's some things in the other cuts which I don't necessarily like, but for me the Final Cut is by far the best. It's hands down the definitive version. So just a quick heads up, the version of the film I'm going to be talking about in this video is Blade Runner the Final Cut. I'm not going to go too deep into kind of theme and story and kind of talking about replicants and theories, because I'm going to be doing a deconstructing a classic of Blade Runner around September, October time before 2049 comes out. I'll go a lot more in depth and do this kind of scene by scene analytical breakdown of the entire film, but that will be later on this year before 2049 comes out. In this video it's more of a brief overview. I'm not going to go too deep into story and just, you know, the whole replicant theories surrounding Deckard. I'll touch on that, but I'm going to take a much more of a deeper dive into all of that later on with my deconstructing classic. Now, where do I begin? I've got to start with Ridley Scott. Again, I've also talked about how much I love Ridley Scott in a lot of other videos as well, but he is one of my favourite directors. I probably put him in my top 5 favourite directors working today. Now, has everything he's done been amazing? No, he's had his hits, he's had his misses, but I've never hated anything Ridley Scott's done. Even something like Exorcist Gods and Kings a few years ago, it wasn't an amazing film, but I still liked it. I still found some enjoyment in it. I liked it a lot less the second time round, but it still looked great. And that's the thing about Ridley Scott's films. Even some of his movies that aren't that great, they still look absolutely spectacular. He's, I think, one of the best visual directors. He's one of the best directors in terms of just world building, in terms of visuals, in terms of the aesthetics. And he's a designer, really. That's what Ridley Scott is. He's really great at designing these kind of sets and these worlds. And Blade Runner is the absolute kind of pinnacle of that. Just the world of this movie I absolutely love, set in a dystopian alternative kind of reality of kind of 2019 LA. It's just so striking and just awe-inspiring to behold, and especially, as I mentioned, seeing it on the big screen in 2015. Oh my god, if you ever get the chance to see Blade Runner in the cinema, I would definitely recommend going out and seeing it on the big screen, especially if you haven't seen the film already. I know there's a lot of people out there that haven't seen Blade Runner, or maybe haven't rewatched it in quite a long time. If it ever gets re-released in a cinema near you, I definitely recommend going out and seeing it on the big screen, because I went and saw the Final Cut. It was re-released here in the UK back in 2015, and I went to see it in the cinema, and it still holds up 35 years later now. It was 33 years by when I saw it, but you know, more than 30 years later, and it doesn't, when you're watching it doesn't feel like you're watching an old movie. Just from the opening scene, one of my favourite opening scenes of any film ever, just so striking with the visuals. Just from the opening scene alone, it's just like absolutely mind-blowingly incredible. You just can't believe this film was made more than 30 years ago. It still holds up all these years later, and I think that for me is a sign of a really great film, because when the film was first released, not a lot of people really liked it. It had its fans. It kind of became a cult film over the years, but when it was first released, a lot of people really didn't like it, really didn't get it. It flopped at the box office. It wasn't a success at all. And as I said, it's gained more fans, well, a lot of fans over the years now. And, you know, it's regarded as one of the most iconic, influential kind of science fiction masterpieces ever made. And I would definitely hold it to that regard as well. But, you know, as I said, when it was first released, not a lot of people liked it. But for me, the sign of a real great film is that 30 plus years later, it still holds up. It hasn't aged a day. There's some great films that came out maybe like the 70s or 80s, for example, that were great for their time in the day they came out, but you watch them now and you're like, they don't really hold up. Some things don't, you know, have aged a bit. And even in something like Alien, which I love, I think, you know, Alien's great. You know, my favourite Ridley Scott films are definitely Blade Runner, Alien and Gladiator. Blade Runner is hands down my favourite Ridley Scott film. Then I put Gladiator. I absolutely love Gladiator. And then I put Alien there at number 3 because I think Alien's really great as well. But there is some shots in Alien, the original, which, you know, have aged a little bit and do look a little dated. But for something like Blade Runner, it just, when I watched it in the cinema back in 2015, what really struck me, I hate to keep repeating myself here, but what really struck me is that it didn't feel like I was watching a film from 30 years ago. It felt like I was watching a modern film. And what was so great about it is that there's not really any CGI in it. If there is, it's very minimal. I don't think there's any CGI at all. It's all kind of practical effects and models, and especially from that opening scene alone, where we kind of pan in, we track in to this across the cityscape on the Tyrell Corporation, and it's just absolutely stunning, and it's better than any CGI could have made that look. It looks so real, so convincing. It still holds up, and it's just models, but it looks so real. Because it is real, it's pure practical effects, you know, it's not some really dodgy, dated looking kind of CGI that doesn't work. It's practical effects, and all these years later, it still holds up, and it still looks just as good, if not better, than any kind of modern day CGI. And again, it's what's so great about Ridley Scott and what he brings to his movies, especially in the science fiction genre. I've said this, but I'll say it again. I think Ridley Scott is best when he's doing science fiction. It's not only my favourite genre, but I think his best films are in the sci-fi genre as well, you know, Alien, Blade Runner. And just the world building, well, not necessarily the world building, but just the world itself, and how we just immerse into the environments and just the locations. We're just there in this world. Just the visuals of this film is just absolutely amazing. I absolutely love how this film looks from a visual standpoint, how it's shot, you know, how it's directed by Ridley Scott. Again, he really is a master of kind of visual filmmaking. He's really one of the best visual directors in my opinion. Just some of the shots we get of the city, whether they're just establishing shots, whether they're really kind of wide shots of the cityscapes, or just I absolutely just love how this film looks. There's not like one frame that I don't like. I think it's just absolutely fantastic. And before I go any further, I've got to talk about how this film has done something that hardly any other films have ever done, and that is such a great kind of melding and kind of hybridity of so many different genres and themes and styles all meshed together into one truly incredible, unique experience of a film which I've never really seen before. There's a lot of films out there that have combined, you know, two different genres and have combined elements of different kind of, you know, tones and styles and stuff, but what Blade Runner does is remarkable, really unprecedented, in that it's got such a combination of so many different genres, so many different kind of just themes and styles, but it all works so incredibly well. It doesn't feel like too many things crammed into one. It all works so beautifully and so poetically. And just to give you a bit of a rundown, it's essentially, the way I describe it is, it's a dystopian noir film. I mean, it's sci-fi, obviously, it's science fiction, but I think the subgenre, you will, or what the genre it comes under in that science fiction umbrella is, for me, dystopian noir or tech noir or futuristic noir, in that it's a neo-noir film. It has a lot of elements of film noir, but it's set in this dystopian, futuristic kind of environment in this kind of dystopian Los Angeles. And I absolutely love that. It's so original, it's so just cool, creative and unique. And in case you don't know what film noir is, it's essentially film noir is a period of film making from like the 40s, you know, around the wartime, where it's kind of, it's black and white. They're films that deal with kind of morally ambiguous characters, where they're kind of almost like anti-heroes, whether they're good or bad. And it's not just like clean cut good and evil. It's like characters are all in this grey area. It's kind of like the detective films, really, the detective hard-boiled crime kind of detective drama mystery films from back in like the 40s wartime era. It's essentially that kind of thing. And Blade Runner was really one of the first like neo-noir films, where it's like noir but not from like the 40s, from, you know, black and white wartime. It's like in the 80s. It's kind of like noir had this renaissance. And this film is so cool because it's, like I said, it's sci-fi noir, it's dystopian noir, it's noir, but it's also this in this kind of futuristic city. So it's kind of like old and new, it's past and future, it's a melding of all these different things into one film, and it works. It's really hard to describe to someone who hasn't seen the film, but you watch it and it's like, it just works so incredibly well. It's what I love so much about Blade Runner, because so many of my favourite films aren't just one genre. They're like, you know, a hybridity of different genres. And this film, it does have the kind of crime, mystery, detective, drama elements of film noir. It's essentially kind of, really, it is kind of a crime, mystery drama, but with these kind of sci-fi elements kind of mixed in there, with just the world and the environments and just the futuristic city, and that's what I love so much about it. Is a crime, mystery, detective drama mix of kind of a futuristic, dystopian, sci-fi elements there as well. And I just absolutely love that. It's just so awesome. I know I'm going on and on a bit here, but let's move on from the visuals, the direction, the world, the genres. Of course, I've got to talk about the performances. Harrison Ford, he's great. I'm so glad Harrison Ford was cast, because it came out around the same time as Star Wars, Indiana Jones. I mean, we got Empire Strikes Back, 1980. We got Raiders, 1981, and then we get Blade Runner, 1982. So a lot of audiences at the time this was released were used to seeing Harrison Ford as Han Solo, as Indiana Jones, and his fun, swashbuckling, fantasy, adventure movies. And this is very different. You can't really compare it to Han Solo or Indiana Jones, because it's a very different kind of role, very different kind of character, a very different kind of performance from Harrison Ford. It's a lot more subdued, if you will. It's a lot more understated. He's not a very kind of outwardly emotional character. Again, it's another thing that links it to film noir. He's a lot more of just this ambiguous character. We're not sure who he really is, what his past is, whether he is human, whether he is replicant. Again, I'm not going to go too deep into that in this video, but and it's what's so great about his Harrison Ford's performance is that he toes that line, that you're intrigued, you're drawn to him. He still has that kind of a magnetic kind of screen presence, and that you're drawn into it, but at the same time it's not some big showy thing like Han Solo or Indiana Jones. It's not some big action hero performance. And that's, I feel like I really have to hammer this home in case any of you out there have not seen Blade Runner. It's like, don't go into this film expecting an action movie. It's not an action movie, not by any means. And there's a few little fight scenes, some little fights, I guess, sprinkled throughout the film, but it's by no means an action movie. It's a science fiction film. It's a lot more about the themes and the ideas. It's a lot more thoughtful. It's a lot more intelligent. It's a lot more just, you know, ambiguous, I guess. It's like up to the audience's interpretation to what's going on. I mean, it's not as, you know, complex as something like, say, 2001: A Space Odyssey, but it's by no means an action movie. And I think that's one of the reasons why it flopped at the box office. I think it was probably marketed, and I'm not entirely sure about this, but I think there was problems with marketing, misleading marketing. People probably went into it expecting an Indiana Jones, Han Solo action movie kind of thing in that vein, and were like, what the hell is this? Some kind of existential take on life and death and what it means to be human, and people were like, screw this movie. But yeah, so don't go into this movie. What I'm trying to say is, don't go into this movie expecting a big, crazy, blockbuster action movie, because that's not what Blade Runner is. Blade Runner isn't about action at all. And To touch on the themes briefly, again, I don't want to spend too much talking about this film, but I've just so many things I want to talk about. Touch on the themes, obviously. Again, I don't want to go too deep into the story here. I don't want to go too heavy into spoilers in case any of you haven't seen it. But it's essentially about kind of, we're in this futuristic LA where these replicants, these androids are kind of outlawed. They're used as slaves on these off-world colonies. But 4 escape, or 6 escape. 4 live, get back into Earth. Deckard, Harrison Ford, the Blade Runner, is assigned to hunt down and kill these replicants because they're outlawed on Earth. Yeah, I'm not going to go too much more into it than that. And that's basically what the film's about. Deckard hunting down and trying to track down and kill these replicants. They're illegal, they shouldn't be on Earth. And without going too heavy into spoilers and talking about what happens in the plot and what happens at the end of the film, what's so great about this movie is that it's not a generic, formulaic, cliche, predictable film. Things happen that you don't expect, you don't see coming, and it's not obviously clear who the hero is and who the villain is. Again, another film noir kind of aspect to it. It's not like characters are in this grey area. You're not really sure who the villain is per se and who the hero is, who is the protagonist, who is the antagonist. What should we really be feeling here? Are we on the side of the humans that replicants should be killed? Are we on the side of the replicants? It's like it really gets you thinking and feeling about what's happening and what you really feel about it. That's what's so great about the film. Again, it's also kind of like a meditation and commentary on kind of what it means to be human. Is it like who we are? Is it what we are that makes us who we are? Or is it what we see, what we experience that makes us who we are as a person, that shapes us who we are as a person? And obviously I don't want to go too much into spoilers here, but the whole final monologue that Rutger Hauer's Roy Batty gives at the end of the film is probably, off the top of my head, it's probably my favourite final closing monologue of any film I've ever seen. The whole soliloquy he gives at the end of the film is just beautiful, poetic. It's just, again, I don't want to talk too much about it just in case I don't want to spoil anything, but it's just absolutely fantastic. Rutger Hauer as Roy Batty is absolutely amazing as well. I know I'm going on a bit here, but the last thing I have to mention before I finish up here is the music. The score by Vangelis is absolutely spectacular. It may be my favourite score of any film. Very different. It's like this synthesised kind of score, but not kind of like the cliche kind of like you would expect in some kind of sci-fi from the 50s. It's so just distinctive and different, but it works so well. You can't imagine the film without it, because the visuals are so closely kind of intertwined with the music, and the music feels almost freestyle, feels almost improvisational, and it was. Vangelis just composed it as he was watching the film, but it all works so well. And the music is such a big part of this film, more so than any other score is in any other film, I would say, that it's just such an integral part of the film. The music's almost a character in and of itself. You could listen to the music and you could almost kind of watch the film in your head. You can see what's going on just from listening to the music. The music is absolutely amazing. I love it. It's one of the things I love so much about Blade Runner, is that the movie works so incredibly well just from the visuals married with the iconic score that it doesn't need anything else. It's such a great example of visual storytelling, and also the music adds so much to it as well, makes it so much more atmospheric. And it's one of those scores where you hear it and you couldn't confuse it with anything else. The second you hear it, you're like, that's Blade Runner. And the second you hear it, you just see the movie in your head. And it's one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of some of the other cuts of the movie, because the other cuts of the movie have this voiceover, this narration by Harrison Ford. And it adds to the noir aspect that he's doing this narration over the movie. But for me, the whole voiceover is completely unnecessary. I'm not sure Ridley Scott even liked the idea of the voiceover. I think it was only really put there for the first cut of the movie, just to kind of explain to audiences what was going on, because they were afraid that people weren't going to get the movie and they weren't going to understand what was going on. So they put that voiceover there that was kind of explaining everything and just saying what we were seeing. And it didn't even work. People didn't even like the movie anyway. But I'm glad that Ridley Scott went back and took that voiceover away, because it is so completely unnecessary. The movie really doesn't need it, because like I said, everything is told to you visually, just for the visuals of the film, and like I said, the music adds a tremendous amount as well. You don't need a voiceover over the top just telling you everything that's going on and what's happening. It's just completely unnecessary. It's only there, like I said, the only reason it was there was to explain to people who didn't get it what was going on, so I'm so glad they cut that. But anyway, wrapping this up now, I'm going to have to bring this to an end. I can talk about Blade Runner for just hours and hours. Like I said, come September, October time, I'm going to go a lot deeper into the film, a lot deeper into the story, and really breaking the film down, kind of scene by scene, deconstructive analysis of the entire movie in my Deconstructing a Classic, and that will come out around September, October time. Like I said, just before 2049 comes out, I'll go a lot deeper into the movie in that, a lot more into the whole Replicants thing as well. And I don't want to reveal where I stand on the whole is Deckard a replicant yet or not. I'll save it for that video, and I'll talk a lot more about other theories and speculative kind of stuff in that video. But yeah, as you can tell, I absolutely love Blade Runner. It's one of my favourite films of all time. I'm wrapping this up now. Another thing that makes a film one of my favourite films of all time, I would say, is rewatchability, in that no matter how many times you go back and watch it, it's just as good, if not better, every time you go back and revisit it. And I could certainly apply that to Blade Runner as well. Blade Runner is one of those films where I've seen it many times, but every time I go back and rewatch it, I get new things from it every time. I see things in new ways, and I think that's what makes a film one of the best of all time. That it's not just a one and done film that you need to watch once and never again. Blade Runner, you can just go back and revisit over and over again, and each time it presents new things to you, and you see new things that you didn't see before. And that's what I love so much about Blade Runner. I think it's got such a great rewatchability factor to it, and I can just go back and watch it over and over again. I can just never get bored. Like I said, I could just go on and on about how much I love Blade Runner and why I think it's so great, but I'm running the risk of repeating myself. Overall, Blade Runner is one of my favourite films, absolute favourite films of all time, hands down my favourite Ridley Scott film. It's also my kind of top 5 all-time greatest science fiction films ever made, which I also did a video on around this time last year. Actually, I did a top 5 greatest science fiction films of all time, so if you want to check that video out, I'll link it at the end of this. The 5 films that I would consider the greatest science fiction films ever made. I'm thinking of maybe doing another version of that, but instead of the top 5 greatest science fiction films of all time, maybe the top 5 best science fiction films of the past 5 years, so more kind of just the best science fiction films of kind of contemporary cinema, perhaps. But yeah, like I said, look forward to kind of a Deconstructing a Classic of Blade Runner, which will hopefully be up around September, October time later this year, before Blade Runner 2049 comes out. I cannot wait to see that. It's hands down my most anticipated film of the year, as you would imagine. And yeah, so I really hope that delivers. Denis Villeneuve directing, we've got Harrison Ford back, Ryan Gosling, we got one of the writers back from the original. I really can't see how this movie could turn out anything less than great, so I'm really holding out hope that it really delivers, because I cannot wait to see that. So yeah, I guess just hanging this off to you guys now. Have you seen Blade Runner, and what do you think about it? Is it one of your favourite films of all time? Do you really love it? Are you one of the people out there that don't? Because I know there's a lot of people out there that don't like Blade Runner, don't think it's that great, and you know, they're like, oh, it's boring. You're boring. You know, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. I can completely understand why someone would not gravitate towards Blade Runner, why it wouldn't be one of their favourite films, because it is quite different. It's not a traditional formulaic, predictable sci-fi action movie. You know, it's very different from something like, say, Star Wars, for example. It's very much its own thing, but I personally love the film. So what do you think about it? Have you seen Blade Runner? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, if you like this and you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to see more. If you missed my last film review that I did on Baby Driver, Edgar Wright's new film, be sure to click over here to watch that. Or like I said, my top 5 greatest science fiction films, be sure to click down here to catch up on that video. But for now, I've been David O'Sullivan. I'll see you next time.